We are recording the interview of Duane Papke. This interview is being conducted by Katie Bradshaw from the Wright State University Veteran Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at the Holiday Inn in Dayton, Ohio. It is 7 p.m. on October 18th, 2019. Welcome, Duane. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
So we will begin by asking where and when you were born.
I was born March 22nd, 1946, in a small town in north central Wisconsin called Nilsville, Wisconsin.
What's the population there?
I am not 100% sure. Have been back for many years. I'm assuming 12, 15,000.
Okay.
Something like that. That
Okay.
neighborhood. My best guess.
Yes. How about your parents? What were your parents' occupations?
Okay, my mother, after marrying my father, before children, was a school teacher up in northern Wisconsin. And my father was a forest ranger and game warden for the DNR in Wisconsin.
Very good. And did you have siblings?
I do, and there's only one living one left, but I had 3 brothers and 1 sister, so there were 5 of us.
And where did you fall in that line?
I'm the baby, the last of the Mohicans.
It's nice to be the baby, isn't it?
Yeah. All my brothers and sisters always said I got favored privileges, but that just comes with the territory.
How was your childhood?
A very happy childhood. Grew up in a small town of 900, Fairchild, Wisconsin. Played all kinds of sports. And once I got to high school, I played baseball, basketball, ran some track. We were too small of a school to have football. And after I graduated and moved on, our school consolidated with a neighboring town, and our farm kids combined with the neighboring town kids. They went to state the next year after they combined, so we had potential there, but just not the numbers.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you had a very active childhood.
Yes.
That's good. That's good. Did you have any jobs through high school that you worked?
Not really. I had a paper route that gave me a little bit of income. But after I got to be old enough, I think it was 14, I believe that's the age, if there was a forest fire and I was home, I got to go out with the men that my dad, that worked for my dad in the forest ranger, and could fight forest fires. And so I could earn money that way. And I was always, I hope there's a fire today so I could earn some money. But every once in a while I got to do that.
Wow, so at 14, you could actually be on the payroll with the forest
it's either
rangers.
14 or 15. I'm pretty sure it was 14. Yeah.
The times have changed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That must have been a very neat experience.
Well, I mean, I'd come home and my clothes were all smoky, and my mother would have to wash everything up, which she did gladly. But that was all. In fact, my dad, at times when there was some really bad fires, he would go to the high school and get some of the young men out of high school that would volunteer and take them out on the lines to help get things under control. That was done a number of times back then. Unheard of today for that to be allowed.
That sounds like that could be a movie script.
Yeah.
What neat memories.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So when did you start thinking about joining the military?
Well, after graduating from high school, what are you going to do? And I'm going to college. And I had no idea what I was going to college for. I started taking courses, and I was just getting average to mediocre grades, and I'd had no idea what I wanted to do. And so I finally, after 2 years, decided to get a summer job, which I did with the county maintenance. And it was during that time frame the Vietnam, the draft was ongoing. And I had a number that wasn't high, but it wasn't super low either, but it was going to get called sooner or later down the road. I worked that summer, and then I went to a recruiter and decided that I would see what I could get for any type of military education to help me out, maybe down the road. And so I played poker with Uncle Sam. I said, I see you're 2 years, and I raised you 2 years, and I enlisted for 4.
To get the education.
Yes.
Very good.
As a 20-year-old at the time.
Okay, and then it's being the baby of the family. Were any of your siblings, had they been drafted?
No. My oldest brother was actually 20 years older than I, almost to the date, and he was in the Army as an officer, but he was out by the time I was going in, And my next brother down had high blood pressure and couldn't get in, and then my next brother down, he was in the military, and he enlisted for 3 years, and he was stationed over in Okinawa when I was a senior in high school. And so then when he got out, then it was my turn.
Okay, so there's quite a bit of service in your family then.
Yep.
That's great. So you went to a recruiter to have a little more control over your service time. Were you allowed to choose the career that you wanted to go into?
Well, I was thinking of being a linguist, but I didn't quite qualify enough with my knowledge of different languages. We didn't have any foreign languages offered in our high school, so I didn't have any idea, but I tried, just wasn't quite good enough to qualify. However, I did qualify to be in the Army Security Agency, and this was a special group of force, and I became, at the time, a military policeman. And that's how I got started in the military. And so I took my basic training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. They called it Little Korea because we crawled around on a lot of rocks. I didn't know I was going to be stationed over there later on, but then my AIT was down in Fort Gordon, Georgia. And after graduation from MP school, got some time off back home, and then I was sent overseas to Korea. I lucked out purely by, I think it was alphabetical. People ahead of me in the alphabet went to Vietnam. People after me went to Vietnam, and there was a number of us in my middle part of the alphabet that were assigned to Japan, Korea, Italy, and Germany. I don't know. I just thank God I was not part that went to Nam. It was by the grace of God that I was not sent there. I would have gone, but I was sent over to South Korea, and I was stationed on the DMZ on the island of Kangwon-do.
How did you feel when you got your orders that said Korea rather than Vietnam?
Well, a little relief, because I was fully thinking that that's where I was going to be, and I had made up my mind I was going to make the best of it while there and so on. And I think my family had thoughts that could go that way, because it was until I got my orders, nobody knew for sure exactly where I was headed. So a lot of unknowns at the time.
Yeah.
2 years. Yep.
Yeah. In general, how did your family feel about you joining? They knew you had a draft number, but how'd they feel about you joining?
No problem. Our family is very patriotic. I'm sort of a very patriotic person myself, even still to this day. I'm very active in the American Legion post in Iowa City, Iowa, in the Color Guard and Honor Guard, and we perform many, many funerals for our deceased veterans, and the families are just super thrilled that we are able to perform this service for them, and it's an honor and a privilege for us to do so.
Yeah, I agree. So when you got your orders, was that before or after your technical training?
That was after.
After.
Yeah, after I got through with MP school.
Okay, so then you headed to Korea.
Yeah.
And how long were you in Korea?
Well, it's a 13-month tour to begin with. And after I got over there and up stationed on the DMZ to my 226th company where I was assigned, I started working the guard shacks up in operations, down in the lower compound and so on. About 6 months into it, I was approached by an ELINT officer, a warrant officer, and he said, Duane, he knew I had my clearance. He says, I've talked to some other guys about you, and they feel you would be a good candidate to cross-train into becoming an electronic warfare operator. In other words, I would take on-the-job training from a buddy up there in operations. And I jumped at it. That got me out of MP duty. And that's what I wanted to do way back when. So now I'm training, and I had a special mentor. He's no longer alive, but TJ Taylor was who he was. He taught me everything I needed to know. And I actually got promoted in the 98J ELINT operator classification, so that when I left, and I had extended 6 months so I could get promoted. And then when I left, I had a choice, and I went to Germany, and I got to fill out my rest of my 2 years of my career in Germany as an ELINT operator. And so I was very, very happy to do that. However, I wasn't that happy that I was going to re-enlist. After my 4 years of tour was up, I was done, finished with Uncle Sam.
That was enough.
That was enough, yes.
So during your time in Korea then,
Okay.
they didn't actually send you back to a technical training. You just did on-the-job training.
On-the-job training. Yes.
Okay. Well, tell
Yeah.
me about your experience in Korea.
Well, when I first arrived, if you look at Korea today, this is one of the, like Tokyo, Japan, is Seoul, South Korea. It is a super modern, huge city. Not so when we arrived. Flew into Kimpo Air Force Base, had some more shots, was given a ride over to Yeongdeung-po, which is in Seoul, South Korea, where our headquarters of the 508th was located. I did a day or 1 day and a half waiting for the courier to arrive from Gangwon-do so I could have my orders and ride back with him to the island. We are bouncing along on dirt roads. It's rice paddies and thatched housing, and that's it. Farmers, peasants, and little small towns that had very archaic cement cinder block walls on some of their buildings. That was maybe the city hall for the building or something like that. But most everything was thatched sidewalls and walls, and their heating was with a charcoal type cylinder that was put in the floor of their housing and then covered, and that heat radiated throughout the floor, and that's kept the little house warm during the wintertime and cold times. And they also cooked off of that by putting some metal over top so that they could cook some meat or whatever they were working on.
Were you ever invited into someone's home to see that
yes.
firsthand?
Oh yes, oh yes. I ate dog. I didn't know it at the time, but it was a young dog, I'm assuming. Anyway, it was very tasty because of the seasoning and the flavoring that they put on. Is very tender. And if you didn't know what you were eating, you just went by the flavor and so on. But that was a delicacy to them.
When did you find out it was dog?
Way after the fact, yeah. If they had female dogs, if they got pregnant, they were all, the families were all happy to have the pups because later on, then they had more food. It was not a real, this was a tough time. Peasants were hard at work out in the fields with rice as their only income, or maybe they did some little carpentry work on the side or something, whatever kind of skills they had, but it was a lot, all manual labor.
And different culture.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So coming into that was a wide awakening eye moment coming up to our operations. And the equipment that now, thinking back, the equipment that we worked with was way back in the early days when you had a TV. It had bulbs in it, tubes. Excuse me. Most of our equipment that we were working with at that time was tube operated, and we had some really super maintenance guys to keep things operational so that we could operate 24 hours a day around the clock. While there in Korea, from March of 1967 until October of 1968, during that time frame, the Pueblo was captured, the U.S. Boat that actually was doing work on the water, the same stuff that we were doing in operations on the mountaintop. And so this was had an Army Security Agency unit in there, and so they were destroying a lot of things just before they got captured and taken into tow. My understanding was that the Kimpo Air Force Base at the time didn't have any manual weaponry on. They were all nuclear and so on, so that the jets couldn't go to the rescue of the boat right from Korea. I think some came in from Japan later on once it was determined they were really going to be captured. And then it was too late, so they were captured. I thought World War III was going to break out with all the triple security that was going on at that time frame. Another thing that took place while I was over there, the North Koreans infiltrated all the way from the border, some were into the courtyard, the presidential courtyard of South Korean president at the time, I think it was President Park. They were going to assassinate him, and they got discovered, and then firefighting took place. There were a total of 90 North Korean operatives, some officers and so on, that came across. None returned across the border. They were captured or killed. And it sounded like a war going on from our island, and we were thinking, oh my goodness. And I think the only thing that kept the South Koreans from attacking the North Koreans at that time frame was the fact that the United States military presence, so much presence in the South Korea, that we prevented them from arming and going north. But they were ready to take on the North again and have at it because of that.
So for you to hear, how far away was your island from Seoul?
We were just, okay. The first time coming to the island, we had, it was like, it's a ferry boat to get on the island, and it's like a World War II beach landing craft. The boat comes up to the side in the muck and the mud and everything, and the trapdoor comes down, and you drive your vehicles in, and they put it back up and drive over to the other side and let you off, and you try to work your way through the muck and get back on a dusty dirt road and get going. That's all and well. That's over the Han River, which separates North and South Korea on the DMZ. In the wintertime, when that freezes up, no ferries are operating. So the only way we get supplies to our island or on and off for medical purposes is by helicopter. So we were kind of like a MASH unit up there, just like on TV. It's what it reminded me of anyway. And here I am living it.
You're kind of trapped. You can't go anywhere.
No, you're not going anywhere, for sure. Yep.
Wow. So how were the winters? That sounds then like they were rough.
Very cold. I mean, we were issued that white snow muckluck gear and hoodies and so on, but yeah, the mission of the ASA must go on 24 hours a day, 24 hours or round the clock. And so we were driving up on trick trucks, and I was one of the drivers. Being from Wisconsin, I was one that had experience driving in winter ice and snow, and guys would ride with me because they knew I was a good driver. But that's how we got up and down our mountaintop. And the North Koreans, while we were there at night, I don't know if you remember, if you're old enough to remember, when car dealerships would have new vehicles come out. They had these great big searchlights out in their front parking lots and everything, and the searchlights were going back and forth and crossing and so on and so forth to make an announcement that the new cars were coming in. The North Koreans had searchlights over on the other side, and they'd follow our trick trucks going up the road up to our operation. They would light us up at night. On the other side, you could look over there with binoculars, and it looked like a village with peasants working and so on. All Hollywood front. It was just a fake village over there all along that whole shoreline, and it was all military in behind everything. And so, but it would make you think that it was just a little peasant village over there doing normal farming. Now, I got there in March that year, in Christmas and New Year's. They had loudspeakers over there and would play music and talk, just like during, during the Korean War, the Tokyo Rose would do all the announcements and stuff, and come on GIs, give up, da-da-da-da. Well, they would make announcements on the north side through a speaker system. That first year, first Christmas that I was there, and on New Year's Day, they read off all of our names, rank, and serial numbers. Somehow, in my mind, either a South Korean worker that was down in our lower compound, because they wouldn't have been able to get their hands on that information up topside, nobody can get in. Somehow they must have gotten into the operations area of where our company clerk and the company commander and the first sergeant and all that was going on, and somehow maybe during cleaning or whatever managed to get a sheet or two of paper and got it out of the compound and sold it on the black market, and it got to the north.
How was that handled?
Well, there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, it's, what's done is done.
I imagine it was stressful. I imagine the base commander.
Well, we're going, how in the heck did this ever happen? But, a lot of speculation, but never could anything be proved. So, just go on, only you double down on your security.
Yeah. So that only happened one time?
Only one time, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I imagine that causing a lot of paranoia.
Well, at the time it did. Yeah. How did I get that?
Yeah.
And all our names.
Now, were you ever in a vehicle at night that was moving and the light from the North Korean side was following?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I imagine that was anxiety inducing.
Well, a little bit, but you got used to it because it was every night. They followed us in the dark, up and down, all the time. So it was to be expected. And if they didn't, for some reason, and sometimes they didn't, you're going, well, I wonder what the heck's going on now that we don't have any lights on us. But it's a little frustrating at times when you're driving around corners and that light's kind of right in your face. But other than that, you just slow down and make it accommodations.
It almost seems like that would be a form of psychological warfare.
Whatever they were trying to do, I'm not real sure, but it bugged some of the guys, but we persevered.
What did you do for fun?
Well, mostly we were we were down in our NCO club, and there was a young Korean boy that turned into be a young man named Chisai, and he was our bartender, and he was with our company the whole time it was open, and saw many people come and go, GIs and so on. But we did a lot of drinking. I mean, a lot of drinking. I learned how to appreciate Scotch. I didn't like it until after I finally got drinking enough of it that it became okay. But I also learned how to play bridge with 3 other guys, and they taught me how to play bridge, and so we played a lot of bridge. I was just talking to our motor pool sergeant. He's here at our reunion today in Dayton, Ohio, and he remembered me as a truck driver going up and down the mountain. And I said, Bob, and I thank you for allowing me. I could check out a Jeep or maybe a 1.5 ton or a 3/4 ton vehicle and go hunting for pheasants or ducks, or going shooting poison snakes, just for fun.
Then if you caught some ducks or pheasants, did you cook them?
They were saved. They were saved for later on for Thanksgiving meal and so on, for special occasions. Yeah.
Did you store them then in the kitchen or canteen?
Our chief cook took care of them for us. We brought them in field dress, but then he finished things up and would put them in the freezer and had them for special occasions.
That's creative.
Before they got too old. You can't just keep them in there forever, but yeah. So yeah, that was kind of neat, going hiking around on the island. Or every once in a while you could go in with some friends into the mainland if you had like a 4-day weekend pass, get in and see some of the sights of the bigger city, and hopefully not get into trouble, but and make it back safely for duty for when you were supposed to be back. It's all in the timing of it was a long bumpy road to and from. Didn't do it that often, but the island had a lot of places you could go explore, temples and so on to see and look into, and you could see all of North Korea, the whole countryside, the North Shore area. It's very beautiful, rolling, mountainous country in that area.
So I imagine as a young man who was raised in Wisconsin, this was probably your first trip over, like, international?
Oh, yes, it was.
But it sounds like you made the best of it and really enjoyed it.
Oh, sure. And now I must admit, it's not like we were the only military there. The ROC Marines and Army had a battalion and company that were stationed out on the perimeter out from where our operations was located. They were our first line of defense. They were there to defend against any invasion, to come and try to do assassination work or damage in our operations. And they caught guys trying to come across by boat and so on, and every once in a while. So you could hear firefighting and so on, and so you knew they were doing their job. And we were very appreciative of having them there. They were one tough, rough bunch of ROC Marines. You didn't want to mess with them.
Being right there in the DMZ area, did you worry about snipers?
Not so much, no, because nobody ever made it that far to our operations that we knew about, anyway. Somebody probably could have, like they do now over in the Middle East, put IUDs on the road or something like that, but nothing like that ever happened. So,
how was communication back home during that time?
Letter writing. Period. That was it. And I look forward to a letter My mother wrote more often than my dad, but I also really appreciated having a special note and page written by my dad along with mother's letter when it was received by airmail at the time, overseas airmail. Yeah, very special. And every once in a while, maybe a little care package would arrive with cookies and some different goodies inside. Of course, you always shared with everybody else. It was gone within minutes to an hour, but that's the way it went.
Now, you mentioned how the homes were out in the community where you were at.
Mm-hmm.
How was it? Was the base set up pretty well, or were you intense?
Well, when it first was created, it was tense, and then became cement slabs with tent structures on the cement slab, and then Quonset huts with that metal round curved graded steel, and they made Quonset huts, and we just had Quonset hut after Quonset hut. One building could be partly the library, one would be maybe a workout room, one could be, most of them were barracks. So that was how everybody was before I got there. When I arrived back in I think it was 65, late 65, they put down a cement pad for a steel block barracks that they were going to erect. And so by the time I got there, it was done, and I could move in along with other buddies in a regular dormitory setting, not a Quonset hut.
Lucky you.
Yes, very lucky. Timing is everything.
Especially when winter came around,
yes.
I imagine.
Yeah.
What about bugs, mosquitoes? You mentioned snakes.
Yeah.
What things did you have to be careful of?
Well, we had we had salt tablets, because if you got too hot and sweaty during the monsoon times, the going philosophy at the time was, I think, to eat and consume salt tablets to keep your system. I don't know what that keeps
your
system.
Electrolytes.
Yeah, that's the way the Army did it. Lots of rain, damp, cold, cool rains during the monsoons, and then during the wintertime, very cold, dry, blustery wind and snow and ice. So it was very severe temperature, climate control things, but that was the way it was in their region. So we just dealt with it.
When you wrote letters home, did you describe these things to your family?
Oh yes, oh yeah, sure.
I imagine they enjoyed knowing kind of what your experience was.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't talk about what you were doing, but all the other little things that you could talk about. Yeah.
Did you have any person in particular that was really special in Korea? A coworker or friend?
Terry, yeah, my mentor was really good close pal. Of course, I was pals with the MPs as well, because I started working there with them originally, and there's a number of the MPs that are here today that we worked together with early on in my career over there. And most of the time it was gathering socially in the club for darts, drinking games, songs, cards, pinochle, bridge. That was our life on our days off. And then otherwise we were working our 8-hour shift, coming back, eating, going to bed, turn around, going back up, day after day until you get switched. You worked day shifts for 7 days, then you had a couple days off. Then you worked eves, like 3 to 11 type thing, and then you had a couple days off. And then you worked 11 until 7. And then at the end of that day, you had 3 days off if you didn't go to bed right away after getting off. So you went right directly down to the club and started drinking. Start your day off early.
The military police do like to have shift work.
Yes.
For some reason.
Well, but the whole operation was that way because we were a 24-hour operation, and so the MPs had to do the same thing. So it just came with the territory.
Okay.
Yep.
When you said here today, just for the purpose of the recording, you are here for the reunion. Do you want to explain just a little bit about that, since it was referenced just for the recording
Yeah,
purpose?
well, we are, anyone who was stationed on the island of Kangwon-do from the time that the Korean conflict war was over until they finally turned off, we call it turning off the lights, until the operations quit in I believe it was 1975 or 74, somewhere in that. I was there in 67 and 68. But anyone who was stationed on the island is eligible to be a member of our retirement unit. And we have close to 125 members currently, and we have close to about 125 that are deceased that were members at one point, but now no longer with us. So we're trying to stay ahead of the ones that are going into our little cemetery patch, as opposed to ones that are able to make it to the meetings. And we go every 2 years, we get together so we can renew old friendships and old times and talk about war stories and remember this, remember that. And we hold them all around the United States. My wife and I have gone to reunions in Orlando, Florida, San Antonio, Texas, Seattle, Washington, Kansas City, Missouri was that when I was the vice president at that time and hosted the reunion in Kansas City. We've gone out to Fort Devens, Massachusetts. We're here in Dayton, Ohio now, so it's been a number of reunions that we've gone to, and we'll do so as long as we're able to do so, but we're going to be a dying unit sooner or later, organization. We're getting aged, and less members are able to get to further points, and so that's why we have a reunion in different parts of the nation, so that we can include some of those that are not able to go all the way across or can't afford to fly from Seattle to Fort Dix, New Jersey, for example. That's a big expense, let alone the hotel and transportation and meals and everything. So that's a big deal. So we try to keep it as economical as possible. And so we're here in Dayton, Ohio in 2019.
That's wonderful. And what a unique experience you guys had on that little island. That's really neat that you have been
It
able
is,
to do
and
this.
I've heard from different ones that have gone back and talked with the people that are living on the island now. I mean, there wasn't any bridges. We just had that ferry and beach landing craft type thing, World War II jobber. Now there are 4 bridges from the mainland to the island that were built. It's like a big, huge city over there. And the people that live there in Kangwa City itself the younger folks have no idea what it was like 55 to 60 years ago when we were stationed there. They have no clue how far they've come and how lucky they are now compared to the way things were when we were stationed over there.
So that must mean they're enjoying modern conveniences.
Oh, yes. Many of them. Yeah. All of them.
So how did you find out you were going to be going to Germany?
Well, that was my choice. Being in Korea, it's considered, and Nam, they were considered hardship tours. And once you complete that tour, then you get a choice of put down some areas that you'd like to go to, and I specifically wanted to go to Germany, and I have a German background, and so that's where I got to go.
Wonderful. So tell me about that. Tell me about the process of moving.
Well, after I ran out of time, I had to reverse and be all loaded up and be down to Seoul and then over to Kimpo and then fly back in. I had some vacation time, at home before going over to Frankfurt, Germany. I was the only person at the time. I had my orders with me, my B4 bag and my duffel bag, and I'm walking into Frankfurt, Germany. Huge train station, and that's how everybody gets around over there. Everybody trains. And so this is all brand new to me. I don't speak German language very well. I know a few words here and there, probably more to get me into trouble than anything else. But people were very helpful. I showed paperwork where I needed to go, and I needed to go to Kassel, Germany, which was about 300 kilometers north of Frankfurt. So I get on the train, and off we go. And I'm just sitting there looking over the countryside, and everything was dark, and then pretty soon we get there. I don't know how many hours later, but we arrive, and the conductor comes around and says, this is Kassel. Oh, I gotta get off. So I get off the train, and it leaves the station, and here I am standing all by myself. There's only a worker over here in the corner doing some sweeping and so on. And I'm looking around and I go, well, this is a fine how do you do. What do I do now? There was no instructions of once you get to this point, you do this, or this point, nothing. Get to Kassel, and then you'll be picked up. Well, how do I notify anybody that I'm even here? They don't know I've arrived or anything. Well, pretty soon, the guy that was over there, the German worker that was sweeping, he looked at me, he kind of chuckled or smiled or whatever, and he kept pointing, and I look at him and he point and he go, there was a telephone over there on the wall. So all I had to do was lift it up, and that line went directly into our headquarters at Rothwesten. The MPs came out and picked me up and brought me in, and that's how I got into my duty station there. And I wanted to get back into ELINT operation. I didn't want to work as an MP, and so I had help from a warrant officer, and I got transferred out to Mount Meisner, which is an outstation from Rothwesten. It's probably 8 kilometers from the East German border at the time, because it was, there was East and West Germany at the time. And so we did operations up there like we did over in Korea. And that's how I finished out my tour. I had a real good friend that I befriended over there who befriended me, Staff Sergeant Jackie Dilch, and I stood up for him in his wedding, and he helped me out getting off base housing, and I lived above a guest house in a little town called Abderode, Germany. The landlord was a little old lady. Her husband had died, but her brother Otto was there, and her mother was still alive. And I had my room, and so I called her Moody, which is mother in German, and she called me Papke, and we got along just great. The Bundeswehr and the Bundesgrundschuld, that's Army and Border Guards, would come into the hotel guest house and eat, and I befriended some of them. We got to talking more. They would practice their English on me. I practiced my German on them. We formed a Kegel club while I was there, and we called it the Kegel Club of the Damen, the bowling club of the women, because we had some women friends that would bowl with us, and this is a bowling ball about as big around as like a croquet ball, if you ever played croquet. No holes in it or anything, but the alleys have gutters, and so you bowl with your hand and put a little spin on it if you wanted to curve and try to get pick up a spare or whatever, and just a blast. You could, and the more you drank, and the sillier it got, but it was a very fun time, and I befriended a lot of good people there because I was the only GI in town. Believe it or not, I was the only one there.
How is that you were the only one?
Well, because I had connections with Jackie, who had connections with my landlord, and she agreed to let me rent
And everyone else was living on post then?
on post, or there was an off-post area that the U.S. Army or government had taken over a German hotel, and that was like another barracks type area. I was there for a while until Jack Dick got me over in Altarota.
I imagine coworkers were wondering, how'd you get this hookup?
Well, no, not really. They knew. They knew. It was no big deal.
How would you get to work then? Would you take a train or?
I actually purchased a 1966 VW Bug, and so I drove myself to work and back. Yep.
Awesome. You had a
Yeah.
good time.
Yes, life was good.
That's great. What's the reason you didn't choose to stay in since you'd had such positive experiences?
Well, I didn't particularly care for how things were going in the service during that time frame. There was a shortage of ELINT ops, and at the time I could have received a bonus of $10,000 if I would have re-enlisted for 6 years. But that's a fairly long chunk of a person's life, and the more I thought about it, I said, I'm going to get out. I had time after I got out. If I didn't like what was happening, I can enlist and come back in. I never did. I got out, and that was it. And I'm glad I got out when I did.
So did you stay in contact with your landlady then?
Well, before I left, they had a big party for me. She had up on her bar a huge wrought iron stand that had a big cognac bottle in it that it would tip, and you could actually pour a shot of cognac out of this big bottle. And I wanted to buy it from her. Oh, no, family, no, can't do. Well, when I was ready to leave, we had a big birthday party with the Bundeswehr and the Bundesgrundschule guys there, and our women friends, and all of her family and everything. And it just, the whole place was a big party place. They presented me with some presents to take home. One was a brand new wrought iron stand that they had purchased for me, plus a full bottle of cognac to go with it. And then they had a wooden plaque about this big around, and they burned in with wood burning tools all their names on the back, and a little well wishes on the backside, and then had the cross bowling ball or bowling pins and a bowling ball down below on front that was all etched out and lacquered up, and very, very personal present from all the ones in the Kegel Club to me, and so it was very, very touching that I had a very proper and honored farewell. Yeah,
That's very nice.
it was.
And have you ever
Some
gone?
tears.
I imagine a lot of tears.
Yeah.
Did you ever go back and visit?
No, never have.
Life gets away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at that point, then what choices did you make? Did you, I assume, went to college with your
Well,
JAG?
I started back into college, finished up my 2-year degree, and taking some more courses. And then I got hired on the university police department, and started out as a patrolman there. 35 years later, I retired as assistant chief. Worked my way all through every position there was in the department, as far as sergeant detective, lieutenant detective, captain.
Very
assistant
good.
chief.
Where was this at then?
At the University of Iowa, at Iowa City, Iowa.
Now, how did you end up in Iowa City as opposed to Wisconsin?
Well, started out when I got home from the service. I helped my dad. He had retired, and Dad had bought 4 houses in our little town and had fixed them up to rent out to people, and that was going to be his rental income and hobbies to keep things going there, as something to do after retirement. And so I painted 2 of those houses after I got out that needed painting, on the outside and some inside painting as well. And then I wanted to go visit some of my buddies that had gotten out, and I got invited down south to come see them and so on, which I did. I bought a 1966 VW bus camper, pop top, had a little ice box in it. You put a chunk of ice in there to keep your liquids cold, and you could go camping and so on. And so that's what it is. I took off, and by George, I was doing fine until on my way back home, I was getting really short on money. And I landed in Iowa City, and I knew one girl there. But I decided I would apply for some jobs to see if I could get some quick money and then be able to hightail it back home. And so I put in for the position at the University of Iowa with the police department. I put in for a Procter & Gamble position, and I put in a position at Owens Brush. And I didn't have an apartment, I just had my VW bus camper, and so I was camping out on the western overlook of the reservoir area at night. And I went back in and saw my captain at the department, and he says, you have been cleared, and we want you as a police officer on our department, and want you starting tonight on 11/7 shift. And so, bingo, it was that quick after he told me. And he said, you got a dark pair of pants? And I said, yeah. But until you get your uniform, wear those dark pants and some boots, and we'll get a shirt for you and we'll get you started. And it was felt like a little ragtag thing getting started, but that's how I started a career of 35 years in law enforcement.
Wow.
Fledging. Fledging.
You sound adventurous.
Well, I like a good adventure. Yeah. Yeah.
So law enforcement, it sounds like that also was a good experience for you.
It was. Many, many changes in those 35 years. Probably the biggest change came in 1975 at the state of Iowa, where if you arrested somebody or let's put it back up. If you stopped somebody that you suspected that was drunk or driving drunk, or there was something wrong medically or whatever, you want to stop and see if they're okay or whatever's going on. Prior to January or July 1st, 1975, you stop somebody and, okay, so they've had a few drinks, but they're not stumbling drunk. Okay, you could tell them at the officer's discretion that made that stop, you could tell them, okay, give me your keys and we'll have them at the department. You get a ride home by taxi or call somebody or walk or whatever, I don't care, but you're not driving the rest of the night, and you can come pick up the keys in the department for you in the morning. And they weren't arrested. After July 1 of 1975, the state of Iowa passed an OWI alternative that made it mandatory that anyone that was stopped on suspicion of drunk driving, and if it turned out they were, there was no discretionary things for the officer anymore. It was an automatic go to jail, no matter who you were, if you were under the influence. And that was a big change it was hard for, especially a lot of the older officers that had operated under this other way for so many years, that couldn't give somebody a break. Now, it didn't make any difference who you were. That was going to be on your record. Sometimes, we had young students that, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to get into law school. Sure enough, you just screwed up. That's a good possibility. Depends on what's going on, but that's the way it is.
Or perhaps get an attorney to get it expunged.
Yeah, which costs lots and lots of money.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I imagine in 35 years, because there's been cultural changes, policy changes.
Oh, sure. There used to be panty raids and everything back in the early college days in the 70s. and riots and so on
Yeah.
after Vietnam and everything. All it was all going on. The university got shown or closed down in the early spring during the riots and all the damage that was going on.
So were you a police officer then?
Yeah, a very young one.
What was your day like?
It
During
wasn't
that
the
time?
day you slept because you were out all night,
What were your nights like?
very active, and you were responding from one area to the next, depending upon where the crowd was and so on. We had so many people come into town during that time frame that just to see and watch, and then they would get caught up in what was going on, and pretty soon they were part of it, and it was just really amazing. We finally had to have the highway patrol get called in on campus. We had other counties that would send units, and then we finally had to get the National Guard to come in to get everything under control so that we could take back the night and didn't have to mess with us night after night.
What year was this?
In 69 and 70,
Okay.
yeah, and 71,
Okay.
before Vietnam was finally shut down.
And how did the riots? So then they came to an end as the war came to an end?
Yes, yeah.
How did you feel about that, being a veteran yourself? But then it sounds like when you got out, there was a little bit of conflict there within yourself.
Oh, yeah, because when I came home from Germany, I got spit at, swore at, called a baby killer, and so on, walking through the airport. And so I was very happy to get to an area where I could change out of my uniform and get into civilian clothes, but I still had all my Army B4 bag and everything. They could still know that I was, but not everybody knew I was military. But my haircut and everything gave me away, you know. Not a fun homecoming from what you
No.
thought you get. That's why I'm so happy for our men and women today when they come home from Iraq or the Middle East or Afghanistan or wherever they're stationed, the kind of reception they're getting now. And I have been thanked more now in the last 10 years for my service than I ever was the first 10 years after I got out. So,
Does that bring you some healing?
oh yeah, it does.
Good.
It makes my day when somebody comes up and says, if I've got my color guard uniform on or my military hat, and they say, hey, thanks for your service. I said, thank you. You just made my day. Yeah.
That's good.
Yep.
And back to as a police officer during the riots, did you feel frustrated with the protesters, or did you feel compassion and understanding towards the frustration?
A little of each, because some were there truly because they believed in this cause to get the war stopped. Others were there just to get in on the action and do destruction, and that was what was really frustrating, in the point that they could be together and you didn't know who was who and so on, or who was going to do what. But yeah, little of each.
Well, somewhere along the way, you were married.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, at the time when I first started, I befriended another guy that worked on the 11/7 shift lived in the next neighboring town away called Williamsburg, Iowa. And he was farming his dad's farm and some acreage that he had gotten. He was a Navy veteran. And so we befriended each other, and I said, he wanted to know if I ever did any farm work. Well, I worked on dairy farms when I was in growing up in Wisconsin, and did farm work. And so, yeah, I said, heck, I can help you out. And so we'd make hay and worked 11/7 shift to make hay the next day, and worked 11/7 shift and so on. Well, it just so happened his wife and my future wife worked in the same department in labor and delivery at the university hospital in the gynecology department, labor and delivery. And Pauline kept telling me, well, Duane, we've got this girl that we want you to meet. And so it took about 4 months for her schedule and my schedule to mash up so we could went out on a blind date. And that's how I met my wife.
How did that first date go?
Very well.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, we both had misgivings, not knowing what to expect from each other and so on. So it was, but it was fine. It was fine. And then we had double dated with Donnie and Pauline, and the next time around made things a lot smoother going and so on, and just progressed from there.
And do you have children?
Yeah, we have 3. Our daughter's the oldest, and 2 boys. And our daughter's 44 now. Our oldest son is 42, and our youngest son will be 40 this coming April. So they're all college graduates. 2 are have their masters, and 2 of the wives have their masters as well, and they're all working, doing well, and they're not at home. And so we're very proud of them. They're doing good in society.
Very good. Grandchildren as well?
7.
Wonderful.
6 girls and 1 boy. So it'll be a lot. I don't know if we're going to stay around and be old enough, because our youngest one is going on 3, and the oldest is like about 13. So whether Mother and I will be old enough to see them graduate from college and get married and have grandchildren, I don't know. Time will tell. We'll see
Hopefully
how things move along. I don't know.
That sounds like a wonderful life that you have had.
Oh, yes.
Since retirement from the police force, what have you been involved in?
Well, basically, my wife doesn't like the cold in the winter. So after the Hawkeye season football tickets are done, and I like to fish. I bought a bass boat. I'm in a bass fishing tournament club. I also hunt, crossbow hunt for deer and shotgun hunt for deer in the fall. So once deer hunting season's over, I'm ready to quit playing in the snow, and we have purchased a house out in the Phoenix area of Arizona. And this will be our 16th year of spending almost between 4.5 and 5 months in Phoenix and 7 months in Iowa. And we go back and forth the past 15 years, and it's been the best times of our lives.
Very nice.
Yep.
So do the kids come out to Phoenix and
Every
enjoy
once
it?
in a while, yeah. And
Wonderful.
if the winter's really cold, we have more company than if it's mild.
That sounds great. At the beginning of the interview, you mentioned the American Legion. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
Are you involved in any other veteran organizations?
No, that's just American Legion. I can't be a veteran of foreign wars because I did not see combat in a foreign war. But yeah, no other military.
I didn't realize that wouldn't count as a foreign war since it was during.
Well, it was already over. The conflict was over, so it's
yes.
like peacekeeping.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Yes. Well, that's wonderful. You've really had a neat life.
It's been a blast, and happy to have my wife and I have our health, and so we've gone overseas to Italy and Spain and Hawaii and Australia, and just we're planning on going over into Europe this coming spring, and so we are enjoying things while we still have our health. So
That's
we're
wonderful.
very appreciative of that.
What advice would you give to future generations?
Work hard, be frugal with your money, and save towards your retirement. because no one else is going to do it for you. And so you need to be a little frugal on what you're doing early on, as far as what you're spending all your little extra money on, and if you can put an extra $25 away into an investment and diversify your investments between CDs and stocks and bonds and so on. I would recommend that highly early on in your life and married life and so on, and continue on, because when you get older, that little horn of plenty gets bigger and bigger, and it mushrooms, and then the interest and everything keeps compounding, and it's makes out for a nice retirement then. But it's all up to you.
That's very good advice. Is there anything else that you would like to share that we haven't covered?
Well, gosh, we've covered just about everything from A to Z here that I can think of. No, just happy to be a healthy individual, still able to hunt and fish and golf. My wife and I both are golfers. We're not super great golfers, but we sure have fun. And we have a lot of friends that are golfers too, so that's another avenue of hobby to get out and socialize. Another way of socializing.
Yes, it's very important.
Yeah.
All right.
So I thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Well, and we thank you as well. This concludes our interview with Duane Papke. Thank you for your time and for your military service.
Thank you.